I am a strength coach, a trainer. I'm a trainer's trainer. And this is what I love to do most, is help other trainers to understand how to reach the over-dieted population. So maybe you're a trainer, maybe you're just a fitness enthusiast who has no idea where to start. This is probably dedicated more to the person who's trying to lose weight and kind of heard of macros and they're like, what the heck? So we're going to talk about, so a lot of people hear about calories, right? Like that's kind of the be all end all of weight loss for most of us is calories. So we understand that taking in enough calories helps you like lose weight, taking in too many helps you gain weight. But when it comes to weight loss, it's not just about calories. So calories do matter, but they're not the only thing that matters. So it's kind of like there's like this blind spot that we have. Most of us, we start off and it is just about the calories for us. And when most of us go through our first few diets, we just lower our calories, we lose weight, and then all is well. But as you start progressing and as you start going through more and more diets, you start noticing that maybe that isn't working as much anymore, or maybe you hit a plateau. You know, you start losing weight and then you hit a plateau. So where do macros come in? Now, the thing that we have to understand is that we know that there's calories in versus calories out is what changes your overall mass. So in order to add any type of mass to your body, you're going to eat a surplus, you're going to eat additional calories, and to reduce mass on your body, you're eating a deficit. You're lowering those calories. But the thing is that the type of weight that you are gaining or losing depends very heavily on the type of calories. So that's where macronutrients come in, is that's going to be the type of calories that you're taking in. So, right. So a lot of people, they're like, which one do I focus on, calories or macros? And it's essentially you're focusing on both, because if you have perfect macros, which is macronutrients, but you're exceeding the amount of calories that you're supposed to be taking in for your specific body type, then you can still gain. But it's just a matter of what are you gaining. So that's what that is your macros really, that triggers whether you're gaining muscle or fat, and that triggers whether you are losing muscle or fat. In addition to the way that you're working out too, but that's gonna, those two are what it's gonna really be heavily based on, is your training style and the way that you're eating. So the amount of calories that you're eating and then the type of calories that you're eating is what determines your overall mass. So your macronutrients are going to be, your macros are going to be your protein, fat, and carbs. So when people are talking about macros, that's what they're talking about, is protein, fat, and carbs, and how many of each you're taking in, like what percentages, how many grams, things like that you're taking in. So you have your total amount of calories, and then within those calories, it's breaking up how many. You're writing this down. Good, Marlene. So within the total amount of calories that you're taking in, you're having a certain percentage of carbs, a certain percentage of protein, and a certain percentage of fat. Like those are your main three that are making up those calories. So your fat contains a certain amount of calories, so does protein, so does carbs. So when you're trying to figure those out, like you want to essentially hit both. You want to stay within the amount of calories that are best for your body and for the goals that you're aiming for. And then you want your macronutrient, your macro percentages to line up with those goals. So that if you're trying to take in less calories, you want to make sure that what you're losing is fat. If you're trying to gain muscle or gain any type of weight, your macronutrients are what's going to make sure that that's actual muscle. So the gaining and losing, that your macros are really going to determine that. So with that being said, I'll tell you a little bit about each of the macros. So your protein is one of the ones that you hear about like the most. Protein is like king in the fitness industry. And the main reason for that is because it's anabolic. So basically that just means like it helps you to build muscle. It also helps you to burn fat. The reason why it's the king of the nutrients that you're taking and the king of those macros for People that are muscle minded. Now remember, we're trying to, if you're gaining, you're trying to gain muscle. If you're losing, you're trying to lose fat and maintain muscle. So all the tips that I'm giving are going to pertain to those things. So that means that the reason why protein is going to be so important is because it's going to have like these essential amino acids that your body needs but does not make on its own. That's the reason why you hear protein talked about so much, because the amino acids that are available in protein, your body can't just create those. Your body can't just make them up somewhere. Like if it's deficient in other things, your body can kind of take something else and break it down and make it into the nutrient that it needs. Your body is really, you know, efficient in that way. But with protein, it can't. So you have all of your calories, and then you have protein, carbs, and fat, and then protein is the one that you'll notice that a lot of, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of crooked here, you'll notice that a lot of fitness people really like hammer home the whole protein thing, and it's kind of like almost annoying in a sense how much they hammer home, but that's why, because it's going to be the one thing that your body can't create on its own, and it's going to be what helps you to build muscle, and it's also going to help you to burn fat. Protein is thermogenic, so that means that your body actually burns calories just digesting it. That's the reason why it's super, super important for people that are trying to lose fat to have, because it's actually boosting your metabolism just by eating it. So you're eating it and then your body burns more calories. So it's kind of this like weird thing. That's the reason why high protein diets tend to do very well. A lot of times we think that it's because they're low carb, but it's really because they're high protein. That protein helps your body to burn extra. You're driving now and you need to take notes. Yes, this is good stuff. So you do want to take notes on that. Okay, so what are we talking about? Okay, so for protein, it's your essential amino acids that your body can't produce on its own. It can only get them from the foods that you eat. So that's why it's very essential for you to either be taking in enough protein with your food, supplementing in some type of way with like you'll see like BCAAs. That's what that's about, is that's just another form of those amino acids that your body needs. Now the caveat to that is that there's animal proteins, there's vegetable proteins. Both are great. The only thing to understand is that pure vegetarians and vegans may have a harder time, and they have to be very specific about eating the right combination of proteins to make sure that they get enough, because animal protein is a complete protein. So most of the studies that are done on all of this is on complete proteins. So that's something very, very, that you have to understand. It doesn't mean that you can't do any of this if you're vegan or vegetarian. It just means that unless you're lacto-avo vegetarian, where you're including eggs and milk in, then you're just going to have to make sure that you're eating enough. Typically, vegans and vegetarians need a higher percentage of protein than meat eaters to achieve similar results, only because of the different types of protein. So it is what it is. Not saying to eat either way, but just understand that if you're not eating a whole lot of meat, then you probably need even higher amounts of protein than necessary. Okay, so there you go, block party. Okay, so with that being said, how much should you be looking to eat for protein? The RDA, and this is something that a lot of people notice, if you like log your food on like MyFitnessPal or something like that, they go in and they start eating the amounts that MyFitnessPal gives them, and the amounts that it gives you are kind of skewed. RDA requirements are like based on your average couch potato. So if you're someone that is working out, then you kind of got to toss most of the RDA requirements out of the window. So that's something that causes a lot of people confusion, because they will, I'll tell them a certain amount and they're like, well, this says that it's 50% of my protein intake, or, MyFitnessPal told me that I already reached my protein intake, or something like that. Like they're looking at RDA requirements and they're like, why are you telling me to eat so much? Like, isn't that really dangerous for me? The RDA is this. RDA is for sedentary person, couch potato. If that is your goal and that is what you are, then that is the minimum amount that you need to stay alive. That's fine. You can hit that. But if you got goals, then this is the kind of stuff that matters. Because if you're trying to make sure that any weight that you gain is muscle and any weight that you lose is not muscle, then you're going to need a higher amount of protein. So RDA is like 0.4 grams per pound of body weight or something ridiculous. People that are working out, especially people that are lifting weights, which I highly recommend, that pushes that number way up. So that's when studies start showing that, you know, you start hearing more of like 0.7 grams per pound, anywhere from like 0.7 to 0.9. So a industry best practice, which if you follow me, then you know that that's what I stand on, best practices. I don't like, you know, teeter between like, oh, like one extreme or the other. Best practices is about a gram per pound of body weight. If you can hit about a gram per pound of body weight, you're typically doing okay. Minimum 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, but 1 gram is just easier to like do the math on. So that's the reason why they do that. And the other reason is because, like we said, protein is thermogenic. So going slightly over isn't really a bad thing. Whereas being way under, as we just discussed, now we're looking at that actually being something that's not good. You don't want to be under in protein. So if push comes to shove and you have to decide, then just push the envelope in being over, because of the fact that of all the good things that you're going to get from it. It's thermogenic, your body's burning more calories just because you're eating it, and that it's helping you to build muscle, burn fat, boost metabolism, feel fuller. So if you have to pick a side, then veer on the side of eating slightly more, because eating less is not really, you know, it's not doing anything for you. So even though now you hear there's a lot of comments about, you know, whether or not protein is bad for you, most of those are taken out of proportion. They're headlines that get, like I talked about this in yesterday's scope, that people take like these marginal things that they see in a research study and it becomes a massive headline, and then everyone's scared of everything. The studies do not show that, unless you are like a kidney dialysis patient, you're probably not going to have any of the scare tactic issues with protein that a lot of people talk about. So just, you know, we're just talking about the science here, and the science does not back up all of the fearful things out there. Again, if you're a person that, if you have known kidney issues, then yeah, you might want to back it up a little bit on the protein. But for most people, you're going to be fine getting about a gram per pound of body weight. What else about protein? I think we talked about everything. RDA requirements, what it's good for. It's vegetarians need a little bit more. So usually, like I say, a gram per pound. Sometimes we'll say percentages, because that kind of helps people when they're punching it into MyFitnessPal. You can punch it in either way. If you're logging your food there, you can punch it in grams. So like if you're 150 pounds, you can set your goal at 150 grams. You can also do percentages, which you can shoot like around maybe 30% or so. If you're vegan, vegetarian, you may want to overshoot that, like 35%. My website is em2wl.com, or eatmore2wayless.com. So, and again, the protein is the one thing that you cannot get from anywhere else. So even though it seems like it's something that like, oh, it's fine, it's not. Your body can't get it from anywhere else. So it starts when your body has to decide what to keep. It starts breaking down the muscle to try to get what it needs. And you don't want to do that, because you want to keep your muscle, because muscle is metabolism. That's how you keep metabolism happy. So you need to eat enough protein in order to produce enough muscle growth and to lose fat in the way that you want. So I think that's all the basics that you would need to know about protein. So let's move on to carbs, which a lot of times they're the bad guy. At my ideal weight, eat paleo, how should I increase healthy fats in my diet? Okay, so we are going to talk about fats too. I do want to address carbs. They're not the devil. They're not the cause of every dietary disease or issue known to man. They're not a healthy diet. A person that's trying to kill it in the gym needs carbs. You need carbs because of the fact that, especially if you're living a muscle-based lifestyle, your muscles is where when the carbs break down and form glucose, that's where they're stored, is in your muscles. So people that start losing muscle find that they have a harder time processing carbs. Go figure. So that's one of the reasons why you have to take that in mind, that the more muscle you lose, the less use your body may have for the carbs, which is why then we start looking at, okay, why is my body storing carbs like fat? Because it doesn't necessarily, like, again, These are one of the headlines that kind of get thrown out of proportion. And there are different types of carbs, and some, sure, they're completely empty carbs and they just turn to sugar in your body, and eating them in excess will train your body to store them as fat. But remember, anything in excess your body is going to store as extra mass. So that's why when we're talking about your macronutrients, you're just trying to control how that excess or the deficit is stored. So whereas eating, it takes, more, like it's harder to overeat protein and gain fat. It's a little bit easier to overeat carbs and gain fat. And it's easy to eat fat and gain fat, but none of them are bad in and of themselves. You truly do want them all in moderation. And with carbs, they give you, your muscles store that glucose so that when you go to work out, you can bring it with the intensity. When you can't bring it with the intensity, your intense workouts is what's going to get you intense results. People are slashing their carbs and then trying to do these intense workouts, and it's not that they're not still doing the workouts, but it's just a matter of fact that your muscles are trying to store that for instant energy. That's the point of that glucose being stored in the muscle. And when you get into a completely depleted state of carbs, it's a lot harder to kill it like you should, which means it's a lot harder for you to get the results that you want. So that's one of the things that's that catch-22. You don't have the energy to kill it in the gym. You can't bring it with the intensity that you need to get the results that you want. So what did the lowering the carbs really do for you? It's really hard, not to mention that being too low on carbs can inhibit your muscle growth. So it's one of those things you don't want to put your muscles, you don't want to compromise your muscles in any way. You want to make sure that you are giving them what they need, that you're giving yourself what you need. And it's not that, like in the industry, carbs are kind of like the go-to for like, okay, strip these away and now I can lose fat. But if you want to lose fat in a healthy way, you want to do something that's maintainable, you want to make sure that you are keeping a healthy, moderate amount of carbs in your diet. This is where a lot of times you'll hear me talking about fiber. That's where fiber comes into play. You want nutrient-dense carbs, as much as possible so that they're actually helping you and supporting you and, giving you time-released energy instead of like the surge and then the crash. But if you're eating good amounts of, fiber, you got your fruits, vegetables, things like that, those kind of things are really going to help you. Thank you. I'm glad you think so. I talked about this yesterday. I do study, metabolism and muscle things for fun. Someone said yesterday, I think the choice between Disneyland and a metabolism conference, I would choose a metabolism conference. In fact, I have been to Disney World twice for a conference. Got to give my guy something to do while I go geek out at the conferences. So anyways, the point is when you totally are reducing your carbs, it makes you less efficient in your training. You can't train at peak performance without them. So even though I know that there's a lot of people in the industry, there are a lot of people that are, that I respect, that may say, like go to carbs, it's a quick fix kind of thing, and maybe you don't need tons of them, but you need enough. And for each person, that's going to be different. You can be anywhere from 1 grams per pound of body weight to 3 grams per pound of body weight. It depends on where you are in your journey. If you've done a lot of dieting and lost a lot of muscle and gained back fat and lost muscle and gained back fat, then you're probably a bit more, your insulin sensitivity levels may be different. So when you go through that, again, like I say, the less muscle you have, the less your body knows what to do with those carbs, because your muscles is what helps your body to process the carbs. So again, this is where the muscle comes into play. It's the thing that helps your metabolism. It's what's going to help you like to stay young. It's what's going to help you have quality of life as you age. It's what helps keeps everything toned and tight and lean. And the toned look that people want is actually muscle. So again, if you're reducing carbs and reducing muscle, then you put yourself in kind of this circle where your body doesn't know how to process carbs whenever you reintroduce them. That's the reason why a lot of us start to feel like carbs are the devil, because we reduce them and then your body gets to a certain state. So when you add them back, there's this reaction that you feel confirms that you shouldn't have had the carbs. A little bit of bloating is natural when it comes to carbs too. I just want to throw that out there. Like a lot of people like kind of get crazy about that because maybe they're trying to get this super like magazine model shoot lean look. And so when they eat a little bit of carbs and there's a little bit of bloating, they're like freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm allergic to carbs. And everyone carbs make your body retain water. So it's not anything unusual or, unique to that specific person. So like I said, you can have anywhere from 1 gram per pound of body weight to 3 grams per pound of body weight. I highly recommend pushing that number as high as possible for your unique capabilities. Carbs is something that you want to have as high as possible so that you have room to maneuver them when times get rough. It's the same thing with calories. That's why I recommend when you're trying to lose fat, lose it eating the highest amount of calories as possible. Lose it eating the highest amount of carbs as possible for you. That's going to be different. Like I said, if you gain back a lot of fat, your insulin sensitivity may be different and maybe you need to be at the 1 gram per pound. But I would push that envelope if you could. Percentage wise, if you're trying to like punch that in to MyFitnessPal or something like that, start at 40%. If that still feels like it's too much, like you can go as low as 35, but I mean, don't do it if you don't have to. Like that's my thing, is don't reduce if you don't need to. And a lot of people don't know if they need to. And a lot of people, because they've done low carb diets in the past, they automatically feel like they need to be low carb when maybe they just need to eat more protein. So it really, really is important. Healthy carbs are going to be anything that has good fiber in it. Fiber with the water attached to it is even better. So like vegetables are really, really good for that. Fruits are great. Even whole grains. Again, I know whole grains, devil, but I don't demonize foods because that kind of it's a blocking point for a lot of people, and that's an obstacle that a lot of people they have a hard time getting over, that when they feel like they can't have something. So I don't like to take that stance with food. I feel like if you eat enough of the right thing, you can crowd out the wrong thing, and then you don't even really have to think twice about it. And I've worked with so many people who said the same thing, and they're like, it's weird that I don't even need that thing anymore. But we never put the focus on removing it because that's not the point. The point is adding the other things that you think you need. And there's so much food in the world that if you're constantly adding, like you can't fit it all in. The reason why most of us have like these allergic reactions to food is because you're eating like one thing over and over and over again, and you're actually creating that in your body, which that's a whole nother scope. I'm not even going to go there. Just wanted to say that carbs are not the enemy. They're not like, they don't need to be your first line of defense as far as removal. A decent, moderate amount of them is needed. Most people can do equal amounts of protein and carbs. Some people can go even higher. They can go higher in carbs than protein. So I really like recommending starting at 40%, not going to 35% unless you've hit 40% carbs, 30% protein, and 30% fat consistently, not like I did it twice and it didn't work. If you've hit it consistently within your calorie intake and you're not seeing any body composition changes, you're not losing any fat, then maybe you start looking at tweaking things and going a little bit higher in protein and maybe a little bit lower in your carbs. But other than that, most people don't even realize that they could lose all that much, but it's just because they haven't, they've just been following diets and they follow the plans and they don't really know how much of what is in it. But when you're taking the time to do it yourself, you can actually finagle those numbers to be something that works for your lifestyle and something that you can keep up in the long run. And it doesn't even have to be as extreme as you may think. So I'm just saying, just try it. Set your macros to 40, 30, 30 and see what happens. So 40% is the carbs, 30% is protein, and 30% fat. So your for muscle building purposes, you usually want your carbs a little bit higher. I will say that if you're trying to go in a muscle building phase, that's usually when I push my carbs to the limit. What you just said hypothesizes that maybe a reason why a lot of people are gluten intolerant, by what? That they are taking it out of their diet or because of their insulin sensitivity levels. I'm not sure if you want to repost that for clarification. Eat too much of something. Yes, that's a big thing. That's one of the biggest things that I learned from my own. I'm admittedly elimination diet queen. So I don't say any of the things that I say from like a high and mighty standpoint of like, oh, how dare you remove things from your diet. I say it from a standpoint of I've removed everything from my diet and still felt horrible and still had problems and created more problems. And so that is why I'm so adamant about the research. And so many people don't realize that that's where they're attacking symptoms and not the root, which that is a whole nother scope, that the root of a lot of our problems, especially our food allergy problems, have nothing to do with food. That's another scope. They have nothing to do with food, but we're not attacking the root. But another thing that what someone just brought up is that we eat too much of things, especially in America. Like we get like stuck on something or we go on these diets and it's just like, that's all I can eat. And so you eat these things that all they have is like corn in them. And then next thing you know, you have a corn allergy and we're eating, you know, like the same sandwiches every day. And then you have this type of allergy. But what most people don't realize is that when they go to remove that thing from their diet, trying to help themselves, then they just go all in on something else and create an allergy there because they're eating too much of it. And when you remove something from your diet for so long, oftentimes when you go to reintroduce it, there is a reaction because that thing is now foreign to your body. That reaction makes you think, see, I knew I shouldn't have had that in my diet, even though it didn't make you feel any better when it was out. And because it now creates the reaction that you see everybody else talking about, you're thinking like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have this thing. And so then you take it away for a little while again, and then you try to reintroduce it, and you just keep having these issues. And so to you, you're like, I knew it. That's why. So that is just, like I said, that's a whole nother scope because I'm really passionate about that because I have, and my husband was on here. I don't know if he still is. He knows because I've taken my family through the ringer with my elimination diets, like eliminating everything. And then still being miserable and still being like stressed out and hangry because I didn't. He heard me talking about him, so he joined. He didn't have to join just for that comment, honey, but he knows that I've taken them through some things. So again, carbs aren't the devil, but you know, you do kind of want the right kind of carbs. You know, I'm not saying never touch, you know, a donut or piece of cake or cupcake or something like that. I'm just saying that those things in excess, those types of carbs in excess are what triggers the signals to like tell your body to store fat. And those are the things that are behind a lot of the big headlines that you hear about, you know, carbs are the devil. Or I was actually at the library today and I saw a book that was called Bread is the Devil. And I had to like text a picture to one of my good friends who's a dietitian because this is one of the things that we talk about all the time. Black beans, yes, they are a good carb. So any nutrient dense carbs, you're going to know if your carb is good by the amount of fiber that it has. If it has like 1, 2, 3 grams of fiber or something like that, it's probably not that good. You know, you want like 5, 10, 15. If you can work in probably about like 5 to 10 grams of fiber at every meal, you're going to end up pretty good at the end of the day. And you want to do that slowly though, because you know there's going to be some stomach issues if you just like throw all that fiber at your body at once and it's not used to it. But if you're averaging about 5 to 10 grams of fiber at every meal, then you're going to end up pretty nice at the end of the day. Now, fiber is not a macro, it's a micro, but it's part of your macros. So that's kind of confusing because the macro is the carbs, but fiber is what helps you determine, you know, if the best part of your carbs, you know, if you're using your carb percentage wisely or not. Because you can hit that 40% of carbs and have like 10 grams of fiber, which kind of shows you that you need to do a little bit more work on the type of carbs that you're having. So if that's the case, if you're hitting that 40%, then you want to make sure that you're still getting, you know, 25, 35 grams of fiber. 30 or more is better. If you're a guy, 38 is where you want to be, 38 and up. And that lets you know that, yes, you got it in your carbs, you hit your carb percentage, but they're the right carbs that are helping do the job that they're supposed to do as far as sweeping that protein into the muscle and giving you energy to power you through your exercises so that you get the maximum results from those exercises. So we covered protein, we covered carbs, and the next one would be fat. So fat is, again, fat is not, you know, now we're in the low carb craze that started, you know, the last 10, 20 years. Before that was the low fat craze, which neither one of them are legit. Fat doesn't make you fat. Eating fat doesn't make you fat. Obviously, again, eating too much of something in excess can be stored as excess. And excess fat can be stored as excess fat. So eating fat doesn't necessarily make you fat, but obviously if your diet is mostly consisting of carbs and fat, then you're probably going to see a little bit more fat maintenance. But fat is still essential for muscle building. It's still, fat protects your organs and helps your hormones to, like, that's actually where your hormones are reproduced, is in your fat. So you want to make sure that you're reproducing the right types of hormones in your fat. But because that is protecting your vital organs, that's actually what helps vitamins get into those organs. So you don't want to go super low fat either. So just something to think about. Again, like I said, too much fat definitely can be converted into fat. Fat is actually easier converted into fat than carbs are. So it's kind of weird. Like, that's the reason why we went through the whole low fat thing, because fat is like, has a 98% conversion rate because it's already fat. So for it to be stored as fat is about a 98%, you know, storage capacity conversion for the storage, whereas carbs is only like 70%. So the whole like carbs turn into fat thing, like, you know, it has a 70% conversion rate. I'm not going to lie and say like you can't, but too much of anything is going to do that. So that's why it's important to stay in your calories and then hit the percentages that are within those calories. You want your fats to be, someone just mentioned it, good fats. You want to make sure that you're eating good fats, which is going to be mainly stuff that's not saturated, like monounsaturated fats, and your omegas are going to be awesome. How much cardio should you do? That is definitely a whole nother scope, but I will touch on it. Probably in a different scope, but you can see all of my past scopes at em2wl.com/scopes. Everything's there, and I have touched on cardio in quite a few scopes, so you can always go there and watch the replays of any of these if you missed them. So peanut butter is a good one. Your nuts and nut butters, things like that, those are going to be good fats. Fish, fatty fish is good fats. Your olive oil, things like that, are good fats. Your hydrogenated oils, which I think we've all heard by now, trans fats, like, that's not going to be so good because your body doesn't even, like, it's not even real. Your body doesn't know what to do with this. So making sure that and anything that has a label on it is going to let you know, it's going to break down the fats for you, and it's going to let you know how much of it is saturated and unsaturated. So now the thing with fat is that fat will give you energy, kind of like how carbs will, and it takes up twice as many calories though. So that's the reason why it's harder with fats, because even though you can have the same percentage of fats as like protein and your carbs, you're going to be eating a lot less of the item. So you can't like eat like, you know, a cup of fat is not the same as a cup of carbs or protein. It's going to be different because fat has twice the calories. So that's the reason why if you're eating a lot of fatty foods, you just have to be aware, because it's going to kick your calories up a little bit faster. So I know like eating good fats is really, really a big thing now too. But again, it's not something that you want to start looking at like, oh, well, I could just eat all the fat that I want and not get fat, because I mean, it's still, those calories are going to add up so much faster because it's twice as many. So like for, and this is probably way too technical, but as far as calories go, your carbs and your protein are, it takes 4 grams of those is like the calorie, and 9 is for fat. So it's literally double the amount of fat. So if you're eating 100 grams of fat, you're eating half of the amount of food that you would have for your carbs and fat. But it helps them to be more satisfying. So you still want to actually have them in there. And like I said, the fat is still good for you, and your body needs it. And men that don't get in enough fat have problems with their testosterone the same way that women that don't have enough fat, like we have hormonal issues too, because the fat is what, like, that's very hormonal. That's why when your body has an excess of fat, typically our hormones are out of whack, you know, and that's when we have a lot of the insulin sensitivities, and we have like either thyroid issues, or we're having issues with, you know, the cravings and things that we have because those hormones are reproduced in fat. So good and bad. So just something to think about. Your protein is a constant. Your carbs they can go up and down a little bit based on what your insulin sensitivity is, and your fat is pretty much whatever's left over. So if that makes any sense. So your protein is non-negotiable. Your carbs, anywhere from 1 gram per pound to 3 grams per pound, depending on what your goals is. Fat loss can be a little bit on the lower end, or if you have insulin issues. Muscle gain, you want to be towards the higher end because that's going to help you. And then whatever's left over is, you can just give it to the fat. For most people, like the lowest that you would want to go in fat for guys, I wouldn't say don't drop below 20% fat. And for women, the lowest 23 to 28%. So there you have that. But like I say, a starting point for most people, 40, 30, 30. It just makes it so much easier, and you can start to see how your body feels there, and then start redistributing things if and when you need it. So I hope that helps. I don't know if that just made everything so confusing. Like I say, a lot of my information is geared towards trainers, so I want them to know the why behind it. But I know a lot of people who follow Eat More to Weigh Less, by the time you get to this journey, this Eat More to Weigh Less journey, you're trying to take control over everything again. Like, you're tired of just picking up a book and following what somebody says and then seeing that same fat regained the next year. Like, I'm talking to people who want to take control, which means that you're going to have a little bit more knowledge. You're going to have to put in the work to know your own body instead of just blindly following diets that get you nowhere and have you spinning your wheels, because you end up right back at square one again. So that's the reason why I tend to go into more detail than most people, and why I'm never just going to give you a blanket like, oh, just do this, because it doesn't work for everybody. But you need to know why it doesn't work for everybody, and you need to know why it may or may not work for you and how to change some of those things. So if your metabolism is not up, none of this matters. That is the big part about what we're talking about here. These are the ways that you get your metabolism back up. Your metabolism falls because your muscle amount falls because of dieting. Dieting kills your metabolism. Every time you diet, you lose more muscle. And when you regain the weight, you gain back fat only. Going through that cycle enough time kills all of our metabolism. I've been there. Most of the people that are on here have been there. We're all rebuilding our metabolisms. And, I've gotten to a point now where I can eat a lot more. Oh, it's no problem. You can always just watch the replay. But that's if you're not familiar with that, you can go to that link that's in my bio, the em2wl.com/start, because that explains all of this. But that's what this is about. Every time you diet, you lose muscle, gain back fat. Diet, lose muscle, gain back fat. And every time you're typically not only gaining back whatever the weight was that you lost, but you gain back the weight that you lost and then some. And if all of that was fat, think about that. Like, that means like we're literally dieting ourselves fatter. So this is why this is about taking control over that. You want to make sure that that's not happening anymore. You want the macronutrients we talked about in the beginning is what's going to help you determine what you're gaining and what you're losing. So that means that if you do go through a phase where you're trying to gain muscle, you're going to have the right macronutrients to do that. When you go through a phase where you're trying to lose fat, you want to make sure that you're only losing fat and that you're not losing muscle. Muscle is so precious. You do not want to lose that, because that's where your metabolism lies. First timer here, tag team referred you. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad that I actually was able to help you in your first time. I hope that wasn't like too deep. I know I go like deep sometimes, and that's why the scopes end up being long, because I can't just give you blanket statements. So if you guys have other questions about those, I tried to sum them up as best I could. There's obviously more to each of them, and obviously everything is way more intricate than, a simple like, oh, just eat 40% protein, 30% carbs, and 30, or whatever. It's not that easy. But if you understand why, then, you can really help channel in on the things that matter for you. Can macros being out of whack cause PMS? Yeah, it can. It can contribute to it for sure too, because, obviously like we talked about, like the fat is your hormones, are in your fat. So when you're trying to diet, period, that throws your hormones out of whack. That's one of the biggest ways that you know that things are going wrong, is your hormones, your energy and cravings, all those things are just like thrown out of whack. And we just think that that's part of it. And then we have to just like white knuckle our way through, but that doesn't help at all either. Why is Diet Coke bad? You're hooked. If you're hooked on it, then maybe you don't start there. Maybe just start with adding in more water to your day. Like I'm not big on removal. I'm not saying that you should be like chugging it, but I'm really not huge on removal because it puts you in the wrong mindset from the start. If in order to stop something, you are best to crowd it out. So crowd out that habit so that, you know what I mean, you're able to slowly get to where you want to be. Hey Jess, this was dedicated to you, girl. I see you just entered and it's probably like way longer than you wanted, but it's okay. This was just about the macros. I tried to break it down as best I could. Hopefully I did you proud. So you can watch the replay, let me know if it's good enough for you. But I broke down what the macros are, what matters more, calories or macros, and you know, and just what they are, like fat, protein, carbs, kind of why you need all of them and why not to ignore them, but also the amounts that you need. So hopefully that works for you. Let me know and we'll talk tonight. So it's all good. Best advice you heard, don't remove, just crowd it out. Yes, that's what I love to do. I really think that it's all about like, just because eventually there's not going to be room for the other stuff. So just keep adding in the good stuff. Pile it on. There's so much out there, so much good stuff that you can be adding to your diet that by the time you try to add it all in, you end up like forgetting about the other things. But just like open up and look around at all the things that you could be trying. It's chocolate or protein or carb. Chocolate is my preferred fiber source. Do not hate and do not judge me, people, because I'm sorry, not sorry, because I love chocolate. I joke a lot that like I eat a ton of chocolate, but like I mean I really don't anymore. But in the beginning I did. That's one of those habits that I like, you know, crowd it out. Now, does that mean I don't eat chocolate? No, because there's no such thing as Kiki without chocolate. But I'm just saying, like at one point I thought that like I would never live without chocolate. Like I thought like if I have chocolate in the house, I would just eat chocolate all the time. And maybe I was like that like for a little while, but you know, I let it go. And now I eat chocolate. What was that, a nature that said chocolate is the fourth macro? And Nature's my girl, she knows. I said this in the other scope, I think, but you guys, Anitra is like everything to Eat More to Weigh Less. She's like the one that like helps all this come together behind the scenes. So she's the one, if you go to the forums or anything like that and you're like confused and you don't know what the heck is going on, she's the one that is like, calm down, come off the ledge, I will help you. Anitra is like everything. So what do you say? Is hubby still sabotaging me? Love you, Anitra. I'm so glad that you finally made a live scope. I can't believe it. You don't like chocolate, but you don't judge. See? Bread and butter. That's what I'm saying. It's the moderation that matters. The moderation is everything. And like we were talking about before with a lot of the food allergies and stuff that people have, a lot of times we're having those food allergies because we're not moderating. So try moderating. Try having other things. You know, be an equal opportunity eater. And Steve's here. He caught you, Jess. So yes, he does still sabotage. Yesterday he was throwing me under the bus about Krispy Kreme. Not even playing. I'm not feeling him. He was talking about my red sign New Year's resolution that I will not pass by the hot fresh now sign without stopping. So there you go. Like I said, no judgment. Be an equal opportunity eater. Yes, thank you. Be an equal opportunity eater. Eat everything. Go around, try new stuff. You know, don't do it thinking that like I'm gonna eat this so that I don't eat that anymore. Just stop even telling yourself what you can't have, and just look at all the things that are out there that you can have. And it really does, like, naturally, it loses its luster. The main reason why we binge on things is because it just has that like, oh, forbidden apple thing to it, and it's really not like take that off, and then suddenly it's not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Like I can have chocolate bars sitting in my cabinet forever and not touch them, and like I've had them like go stale and stuff recently, and my family's like, what's wrong? Are you sick? What's wrong? Because I love chocolate, but it's just because it's always there and I know that I can have it at any time. Guess what? I don't go crazy on it. And a lot of people don't believe that they can ever get to that point, but you can, and you do. And it starts with, you know, taking the labels off, the good versus bad foods. Like that in and of itself makes you want it. Someone asked earlier about cheat meals and how I feel about cheat meals. And I mentioned earlier my friend Leslie Schilling, who she is dietitian on here. She's like Nutrition Leslie. And that's one of the things that she talks about. If what you're doing requires you to cheat, then, you know, she feels like that's not sustainable or healthy. Because you should be able to have it like any day. It shouldn't be a cheat. And when you put that label on it, then that's when you feel like I don't deserve. Like cheat is something that you do in the dark. You hide from it. Like I'm not gonna hide if I'm eating chocolate from y'all, or if I stop by that red Krispy Kreme sign. I'm not hiding it from y'all. Like it's like I don't. That's why I'll say it. I don't necessarily need to hide it because it's not something that I'm doing all the time.